Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, for today's episode, I wanted to talk about something that, I've been hearing a lot of people from training camp talk about, whether it's, Coach Campbell, whether it's the players. I've even heard the reporters and those that are at camp that are reporting and seeing things. They've been bringing up constantly, whether it's, asking Campbell questions, asking the players questions. It is a constant, reinforcement of this kind of idea that I keep hearing no matter where I'm listening to. And it's always about how, hey, things have changed. You've lost some players, you've lost some coaches, you're coming into this year, people are thinking you're going to take a step back. People are trying to say that, we shouldn't expect as much from the Detroit Lions, blah, 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 blah. We've heard it all off season. It's not gone anywhere. That narrative has well been entrenched, and it has been well fortified within the national media of, this is what we should expect from the Detroit Lions by not expecting as much. And the funny thing about it is that every time a reporter brings that up or somebody asks that question to either, whether it's the coaches, whether it's the players, the same response comes out of the Detroit Lions' mouths. And, it might be in some people's minds a cookie-cutter response, but for the Detroit Lions, it's not a cookie-cutter response. It's not one of those responses that, we have to say it because that's what you're supposed to say. No, they say it because they absolutely believe it. They say it because it has been so ingrained, it has been so fortified in their constitution as far as players and as far as coaches and as far as an organization is that there is no other answer. That is the only answer. And it's just like the thumbnail image of this episode states. The standard is the standard. Again, when you're talking about the Detroit Lions, everybody wants to, come up with this idea that somehow the Lions should not be expected to do anything grand this year. Like, you know what? They're still going to be a good team. They'll probably get to the playoffs. They might win a playoff game or two, but we shouldn't expect them to go to the Super Bowl. We shouldn't expect them to be considered one of those top echelon teams. They're just going to be one of those good teams that might get a break here or there and, they'll have a good season, but they're not going to go to the Super Bowl. That's what every single freaking top analyst I've ever heard this entire offseason wants to try and say. It's what I've heard all the naysayers from other, fan bases talk about, whether it's, freaking the Packers, whether it's the Bears, whether it's the Vikings. It does not matter. They all say the same thing. And the funny thing about it is that they all have the same mindset, but yet they are all basing it off of the exact same stupid, idiotic concepts that everybody has been tiring themselves out on this entire offseason. You don't have Ben Johnson, you don't have Aaron Glenn, you lost Frank Ragnow, you lost Kevin Zeitler, blah, 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 blah. It's like, dude, I get it. We lost those guys. They're no longer here. But I'm going to say this right now. With 100% authenticity. There is very, very, very rarely in any such sport, especially in football, where you can say that a guy is truly irreplaceable. And the reason I say that it's very rare to happen is because there are some players where it's like, it's hard to replace them, or it's impossible to replace them. Case in point, guys like Tom Brady, guys like Peyton Manning, guys like, Mel Blount, guys like freaking, Mean Joe Green, the all-time greats at certain positions, you cannot replace those guys. You cannot replace them. You can't just plug somebody else in and you're going to get either something that's close to it or you're still going to get a good amount of actual, production from somebody. It's just not going to happen. And for me, it's like, I could understand that argument with someone like, say, a Frank Ragnow, because it's like, you know what, Frank Ragnow, I said it for a number of years and I continue to say it, Before he retired and before Jason Kelsey retired, that was 1A, 1B when it came to the centers in the NFL. That's how good they were. But outside of Frank Ragnow, Kevin Zeiler's not irreplaceable. Ben Johnson sure as hell is not irreplaceable. Not even Aaron Glenn is irreplaceable. They all can be replaced. They can all be found with other guys who can do the job either to the same caliber or better than what they did. The only reason why Frank Ragnow is a little bit of a, kind of a question mark right now is because it's like, okay, we know what we could get from Graham Glasgow if he were to slide into that position. And Dan Campbell himself has said, hey, we already know what we could get from Graham. We already know if we were to slide him in, we would be absolutely 100% fine with that. But the question mark surrounding that is, well, what if Tate Ratledge is actually able to do better at center and we can just slide him in and, we can move Graham to right guard and we can move Christian Mahogany to freaking left guard? That's why they're doing all of these kind of concoctions right now and these mixtures to try and figure out, okay, what's the actual best, offensive line combo that we can get? But it's like, listen, Frank Ragnow, while he was a special player, and as far as in my opinion, you're not going to find another Frank Ragnow anytime soon. It's like, depending upon how Tate Ratledge actually fills into the role, who knows? I'm not saying he's going to be better than what Frank Ragnow was last year as a seasoned vet. There's no way I would say that. But it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe the Lions saw something in Tate Ratledge and said, hey, we could actually use him as our center, so then that way we could still maintain the interior of our offensive line to a pretty strong semblance of what it was last year. So to me, it's like, okay, despite everybody trying to say that, oh, well, you know what? The expectation around the Lions, it's different this year. You can't expect the same amount as what you've expected in the past. Based upon what? The fact that they lost a couple of guys? The fact that they've lost most guys that are not irreplaceable? I don't give a damn what anybody wants to say about Ben Johnson. He's not irreplaceable. And based upon what the players have said about Johnny Morton, or as they like to call him, Johnny Moe, it sounds like he's already been replaced in spades. And then when you talk about Kelvin Shepherd, the same thing is also true. It's like, listen, Aaron Glenn, he was very highly respected. He was very well liked by the players on defense. But damn near every freaking defensive player that has talked about Kelvin Shepherd in camp this year, they're like, hey, you know what? The standard is the standard. We already know what to expect. Kelvin Shepherd is expecting the exact same thing out of us than what we were expected out of from Aaron Glenn. Nothing has changed. We have the same expectations about ourselves. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is the narratives that people keep trying to push out that say, oh, well, you know what? Because this has changed, we can't expect the same things from the Lions. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting point, but it's not provable. It's not provable until we actually get on the field. It's not provable until we see what the actual defense and offense are doing when they get out on the field. And you know what? Based upon the reports that we're already hearing, I don't think it's very likely that we're going to see what a lot of these idiots on freaking national television are trying to say. I don't think we're going to see what Nick Wright is trying to say. I don't think we're going to see what guys like Stephen A. Smith or freaking Colin Cowherd are trying to say. I don't think that's going to happen. Because it's like, listen, you want to try and say that, oh, you know what, because the Lions had to reshuffle a couple of things, well, we can't expect the same thing out of them that, we've seen from them in the last couple of years. But yet, correct me if I'm wrong here, I have not heard the same kind of thought process when it comes to people like, the Chiefs in times past when they lost Tyreek Hill or when they lost other certain pieces, because it's like, oh, so long as they have Mahomes and Andy Reid, they're going to still be a top contender. They're still going to be a top player. And it's like, so you're telling me just because of those two, nothing else changes, but if the Lions lose 4 or 5 guys, everything changes. But yet, wait a minute here, we still have Goff, we still have Campbell, we still have Gibbs, we still have Monty, we still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, we still have Laporta, we still have Jamin, we still have Hutch, we still have Campbell, as far as Jack Campbell, we still have Brian Branch, we still have Kirby Joseph, we still have Terran Arnold, it just goes on and on. So you're wanting to try and tell me that because we lost Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, and a couple of guys that, you know what, the standard is no longer the standard. The expectation has changed. You're a fool. You're an absolute idiotic, moronic fool if you want to try and pull that nonsense. That's why everybody in camp is saying the same thing. Doesn't matter if it's Taylor Decker. Doesn't matter if it's Derek Barnes. Doesn't matter if it's Terry and Arnold. Doesn't matter if it's Jared Goff. Doesn't matter if it's Dan Campbell. They're all saying the exact same damn thing. The standard is the standard. The expectation has not changed. Everybody knows exactly what the expectation is because their internal expectations are higher than anybody else's. Their expectation is to go to a Super Bowl. Their expectation is to win a Super Bowl. And they're not going to let anybody try and dissuade them on that front. They're not going to let anybody try and say, oh, well, you know what? Because of this, that, or the other reason, you shouldn't expect that this year. They're going to be like, okay, that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. But I guarantee you this, behind the scenes, they're probably chuckling and laughing and saying that a lot of people that have that thought process are just as big of idiots as anybody else. Because they already know that inside of their own locker room, inside of their organization, their expectations, their standards are higher than anybody else's. Because that's the standard and expectation that they set for themselves. So again, when I take a look at what is going on already from camp, it's like, listen, I'm nothing but, absolutely excited about what I'm seeing and hearing because it's like, listen, the players aren't getting down on themselves. They're not worried about the fact that, that they've lost some pieces because to them it's like, hey, it's football. It's professional football. You're going to lose people along the way, either because they retire, like Frank Ragnow, they move on to pastures that are different, such as, with frickin' Ben Johnson, or whether it's with Aaron Glenn, or whether it's with Kevin Zeitler. People are going to move on. You can't expect to retain 100% of all the pieces that you've had over the last couple of years. But just think about this. The fact that the Lions have been able to retain 80 to 90% of the same core group that they have had over the last 4 years, not only in terms of coaches, but also in terms of players, and they have continued to add on to it and continue to get better, that is virtually damn near unheard of in the professional leagues. Because it's like, dude, there is so much turnover when it comes to the teams now. It's like, hey, you know what? You might get a player or a coach in a place for maybe 2-3 years tops. And then you know what? They're moving on somewhere else. They're trying to find a better deal. They're trying to find a better scheme. They're trying to find a better chance to win a Super Bowl. The days of when a player or a coach would absolutely stay in the same place for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, those days are long gone. The fact that you have players that have stayed in the same place as long as they have, those guys are anomalies by comparison in today's NFL. And it's the same virtually in almost all of professional sports. Doesn't matter if it's the MLB, doesn't matter if it's the NBA, it's the same thing. Because there are people now that are not interested in loyalty to an organization or loyalty to a concept. They're interested in loyalty to one thing. Themselves getting more money, more success, whatever the case might be. But that's not the case with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are loyal to a concept. They're loyal to an organization. They have proven that, you know what, even if we lose guys along the way, because we have maintained and retained the core concept of who we are, and we have continued to build upon that for when we might lose pieces along the way, our standards have not changed. Our expectations have not changed. That's why I say what I say. The Lions have this expectation of themselves that remains unchanged despite the changes, and it's absolutely on an elite level. Because the Lions know, it's like, listen, just because we lost a couple of guys, it doesn't mean that changes who we are as a team. Because the main part of who we are as a team, it still remains. And so if that still remains, the standard still remains. The expectation still remains. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to put this episode out there because I kept hearing standard, expectation, and I kept thinking about it, rolling it around in my head, and I was like, man, this is a really good concept to talk about. This is something that I really want to get out there. So I'm trying to give you guys as much content as I possibly can because there's a whole bunch of stuff that now we're in training camp. It's like, hey, you know what? Just pour on the gas. Let's just put out as much as we possibly can here. So hopefully you guys are all enjoying it. I'm trying my best to keep up. But anyway, folks, I just want to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like the content, I hope that not only I get you guys to watch the next episode, but I also hope that if you've not subscribed in the past, that I gain your subscription. But I also want to hope and pray that you will do this as well. Please, by all means, make sure you hit that bell notification icon along with it so you guys don't miss any more content that I push out. I hope everyone out there has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.